Hi everyone, welcome to another LaTeX tutorial for beginners. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create tables in LaTeX. All right, we are going to look at how to create three types of tables. So we have the first type here, which is a classic table. I'll show you how to create it. Then we are also going to look at how to create a table where one of the cells, or at least one of the cells, spans multiple rows, like this one here. Okay, so here we have a cell here, and on the other side of it, on the right side, we have some of the contents here. The contents are in several rows, multiple rows, but then this one here should span. Okay, and we also have another table here where we have what you call a multi-column table. All right, so here one of the cells span multiple columns. You can see this one here. So there are two columns under this particular header here. All right, so these are the three types of tables we are going to create. So let's get started. So we are going to start with how to create a classic table, which is here. And please pay attention, because there are several things you will need to know here, okay, and which you also apply to the subsequent tables. So let's get started. All right, so first of all, open your LaTeX environment. I am using the offline version, so this is my text editor, i.e. Text Studio. For beginners, you can also run LaTeX online. You can use Overleaf. There are other environments as well, but Overleaf I think is popular, and so I'll leave the link to this page also in the description box. Overleaf is free. Okay, some of the packages are free, so for the most part, for basic documents, you can use the free version online. All right, so let's get started. So I am back to my Text Studio, and we will proceed. I'll first save my file. So I'll say tables classic. I am creating a classic table, the type or the kind that we all know. All right. So first of all, I'll go again. Let's start here. We are going to create a classic table, which is here, and that is why that's this first type here, this table here. So that's why we have our latest environment open. So here in this table, we have what? The name, age, position. So it's a list of employees. So we have 3 employees. We have their ages as well as the positions they hold. That's what we are going to do here. So in this table, we have what? Our caption or title. We also have headers, and we have the contents themselves. Okay, so this is a column, this is a column, this is a column, and then each of these is a row. All right, so let's continue. So we have our document. Let's initialize it. So I'll just say /document class 10 pt. That's my font size. I'll use a document type article. Then I'll say /begin document and then /end. So in this environment, in this block is where I'm going to create my table. Now let's proceed. So to create a table, you need a table environment. So I'll say /begin, and then I'll say table, and then we have /end table. So this is the table environment, and this is where we are going to create our table here. All right, so you create your table, you indicate your formatting, all that stuff in this block. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to start with what? The caption. So we are starting with the caption because we want the caption to be above the table. If you want the caption to be below, you can put it just after you have created a table. Now I want it above, and that is why we are putting it first. So I'll say /caption, and it's what? List of employees. So that means if you are going to create a table, you need to have your caption available. Now, after the caption, now we come to the table itself. So the table itself, we have our tabular environment. We also have tabular X. Here we are using the tabular environment. All right, it's simple and easy to use. So you will say slash begin, say tabular. But before I even do that, let me clear this. Let's actually run this first to make sure it's working. We will come to this. So let's run this. Let's go to build and view. So mine is going to be on the right side. So here we see what? Table 1, list of employees. All right. That's what we have as our caption. I think it's what we have here as well. All right. So it's here. Okay. Only the caption counts because we are yet to create the table itself. So take note of that. I can also zoom in here for us to see. All right. Now let's create the table. Now, if I go to create a table, before I even start, you need to know the design of your table. Here, this is our design. So we see that we have what? 4 rows. All right. But for the rows, one of the rows is going to be used as column headers. All right. So that's what we have here. So these are headers. But in the LaTeX objects, in the LaTeX environment, these are all rows. All right. Which we need to add. All right. So you need to have that as well. And then you also need to have, so we have your rows, you have your columns. So here we have 3 columns and then we have 4 rows for this table. Even though this is going to be our header columns, it's still going to be considered as rows, okay, in the LaTeX environment. So let's continue. Now to create a table, we need our tabular environment, which is different from this table environment. This is the main environment. Now we need tabular. So we say slash tabular. All right. That's what we need. But it's supposed to be begin. I'm only giving this text here, but the actual one is here. We have to say slash begin and we say tabular. That's what we need here. Now, once you have this, it's important to also define the columns. That should come next. All right. If you look at our table here, we have 3 columns. And so for the columns, they should also be in curly brackets. And then you define them. And so here we have this. And you should also take note that in this table that we have border lines left and right. We also have lines up and then below, and then we have the lines in the table itself, the inside, the inner lines. All right. Now on the left and on the right, this is something you need to add when you are defining your tables if you want it that way. And so in the columns, we first bring a vertical line, then we indicate the column, which is the first one, C, another vertical line, C, another vertical line, C, another vertical line. All right, this is what we need to have. Okay, so that indicates our columns, and that also lets LaTeX know that we want lines. We want lines to be drawn to separate these columns, okay, and also at the beginning and then end of the tables, because we have these columns here. So on the far left, that's the first column. On its left, where we have the border, we need to have a line here, and then inside also we need to have our lines. That's what these vertical lines mean. All right, so that should get us started. There are other things you can add here, which I'll talk about in detail in another video. For now, this is what you need as a beginner to get started with creating tables in LaTeX. All right, so let's continue. So when we go to the next line, we add slash H line. So why do we add H line? We are adding H line because we want each of the rows to what? Be separated by a line. The H line means horizontal line. And we also want lines above the first row, which we have here, which we are going to add, by the way. So here it's similar to you drawing the line. All right. So the H line is something like this. Let me just do something here for us to see. The H line is something like this. You come in to create your table and first adding your horizontal line like this. Okay, that's what this H line simply means. So that means we are first adding a line here. That's what we are doing here. Okay, so that becomes our H line. Okay, so this is basically it. I'll just enlarge this. Yeah, we will come back to this later. So I'm just trying to give us a visualization of what we are going to do here. So this is the H line that we have indicated. All right, now let's proceed. I'll just switch back to the default. All right, now let's get back to LaTeX. So this is the H line that we have. Now after you have added your H line, your horizontal line, then you indicate your rows. Okay, so here the first row we have is what? Name, age, position. That's what we have. And so that comes next. So we say name, age, position. It's also important to separate these columns. All right, we want to tell LaTeX this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. And so therefore we use a separator called the end symbol. So name, age, and position. So this tells LaTeX that, okay, this is separated. So that means on the left is one column, on the right is another column. And then from here, this is a separator. So this is also another column. That is what it simply means. When you are done with that particular record, okay, this is a row, by the way, but then for each of the rows, we should have 3 columns. So that's why we have the end, this separators here. Now, when you are done with each row, you need to bring double slash. All right, and you move to the next line. That's what you need to have here. All right, so when you move to the next line too, you have to just add your H line / H line. That's horizontal line, because we want to separate each row also with a line. So if we were to do it visually here, like I was doing here, as we have, let's say this is a row or a record. I'll just do something here. Let's say if this is a record. All right, I'll try to do something here for us to see. If this is supposed to be a record, which we have here, something like this, let's see. Yeah, something like this should be good for the start. Once we are done with this, we have to bring another line. Okay, another line. All right, that is what the H line simply means. So that line is what we are bringing here to separate the next record that we have. I'll just bring this here. That line that we have, okay, is what we have here as the H line here before we add the next record, which is Michael 32 manager. Okay, that's the next record, or let's say the next row. All right, and so here we now come and we see what Michael. So we add our separator and 32 and manager, because this is the end of the row and we are going to start another row. We indicate with what? Our double slash. We move to the next line, we add /H line. The next line is what? We have Karen 27 secretary. So Karen 27 secretary. We'll bring our double slash because we are done with that record. Then we move to the next one. We say /h line. And the next one is what? We have John 30 analyst. So we have John and 30 and analyst. You indicate our slash again. In the next line, we say /h line. All right, and we are done. That is all for that record. All right, so we have our 3 records, and we also have our headers. All right, that's what we have here. Now, when you are done, we started with /begin tabular, so we have to end with /end tabular. All right, that's what you need to end. All right, so that we can get it complete. So this becomes our complete table. That's what we need to have here. So let's run this and then let's see what comes up. Good. Now we see on the right side the table has been created. That's what we see here. All right, so this table that we have seen here. Now if you take a look at the table that we have here, we see that the caption here is centered and the table that we have is aligned to the left, and so ideally they should all be in the same location. And so what we are going to do is to center the table here as well. Now if we want to center the table, we need the center environment as well. And so what we need to do is to do this. Now, after the caption, you can also put it before. All right. Now, after the caption, or I'll just put it here just to be safe. So we'll just put it here. So we'll bring a centering block so that everything in that block becomes centered. So just after this one, just after the main table environment. After the main table environment, what we are going to be doing is to say /begin center, and then caption tabular. They are all supposed to be within that block. So that means the next /end center should be coming after the tabular. So we say /end center. This is what we should have. And so let's run this. If you run this, let's see what happens. Good. So now we see that the table and then the caption both have been centered. That is what we want to see here. Okay. Now let's see what happens. If you take a look at this here, the caption here and then the table, you can also increase the space between them. And so if you want to add an extra space between the caption and the table itself, just after the caption, you say /vinline. For now, we are doing just one. So I'll run this, and when you run, you should see on the right side here that there's now an extra space in between them. You should take note of that. Now I will just remove it. This is just to show you. Okay. Another thing you should also note, you should take note of is this one here. Now with the tables, let's just say there was a text somewhere here. I'll just give a random text here. I'll say, hi there. This is a LaTeX tutorial. I'll just use the on how to create tables. Let's do this. Let's run this. Now, if I added the text before the table and I run it, we are going to see something like this. All right. So when you create a table, okay, with these parameters, by default, the tables are placed on top. All right. So by default, I repeat, the tables are placed on top of the page. And so irrespective of how much text you have before the table was created, the table will automatically be sent to the top. Now this behavior can be changed because you may want to have your tables appear in a certain order, all right, or at a certain location. And so there are options that you can use. You can place it at the top, you can place it at the bottom, you can also place it at a specific location of your choice. Now let's just say that we want this table to appear as we have created the document. So that means we want to have the text first, this one here, and then the table comes next. And then if, let's say, there was to be another text, let's just say hi there. This is the end of the document. Okay. This is the end of the document. So if, let's say, you wanted the LaTeX documents here that you have here, you want the table to appear in the same order as the content. So that means this text first, and then the table, and then this one. Then ideally what you want to do is to tell LaTeX to place the document in the exact location. Okay, the exact location that you have specified, i.e. in that order that you have specified in the document here. And so you have to use the H option to place a document. And so with that one, you do it when you start the table environment itself, the main table here, environment. All right. And so here, what you want to do is to add this. We say square bracket, and then you say H. Okay. And some may also want to add the exclamation mark. So the H simply here, the H here means that you want the table to be placed exactly where you created it. That is here. So that means it's going to appear in that same order as you have in the document. So here, H for here. Now the exclamation mark here tells LaTeX that we want any default parameters or internal LaTeX parameters to be overridden by what you have specified here. So this is going to take preference over other parameters. So now let's run this. Good. So now when you run it, you see that it has what? Changed. It's appearing as it's supposed to be in that same order that you specified. Now if you want it to be at the bottom, you can add B. And then to go at the bottom of the page. So sometimes you may want to force certain designs or certain placements. You can use some of these things to ensure. All right. Now I'll go back to H, and then I'll put it here. All right. So this is what we are going to have if you create LaTeX and you specify the position. So this is how it's done. Now let's look at something else. All right. Now with LaTeX, you can also use it to reference or refer to some objects or items. Now let's just say you want to make reference of this table in the text, in another paragraph. It's possible to do that. All right. So in that case, you have to add a label to your table. All right. So for example, I'll just add this here. So let's say you may want to reference this table in another line, which we'll look at. You add your label. Okay, so here what we do that after the caption can say /label. And then you give the label that you want. You can say my table. And so that means if you want to refer to this table in another location, another paragraph, or somewhere else, let's just say this is my first table, or let's say this is table, all right, table 1 or something, any text. So if you want to refer to that table here, you just say /ref, then you indicate the label that you use. Here we said my table. All right, this is it. You can bring your dot, whatever, but that one, it depends on you. So now if I run this, you see what is happening here. It says this is table 1. Okay, that is what has been indicated here because we gave a label here. You should also take note that by default, LaTeX numbers the tables for you automatically. All right, so I mean, there are ways you can use to change the behavior, which we'll talk about later in other videos. All right, when we have multiple tables. But for now, let's proceed with what we have here. So this is what you need. Okay, so this can be used to also reference the table here. All right, so this is how to create the classical table in LaTeX. All right, so we can now try using your own data sets and then try to experiment and then create some tables and have some fun. All right, so let's proceed. Now, this is for the first example. And by the way, the LaTeX code, everything here, the down link is in the description, but you can use the links to get the files and all the materials. Okay, now let's proceed. We'll go to the next table type, which is this one here, a table spanning multiple rows. But first, let's create a new file, and then we will come back to this. So here I say table multi-row, and then I'm going to close this and then restart the next one. All right, so now we are going to look at how to create another type of table, or let's say another kind of table. So it's a table where one of the cells span multiple rows. In other words, a multi-row table. So this is an example. So here we have a table which indicates what? A list of newspapers by country. So we have 2 countries, and for each of these countries, there's another column, and that's list or specify newspapers that are in that country. So here we have USA, there are 3 newspapers. We have UK, there are 2 newspapers. You can see that this is 3, so that means we have 3 rows, but then the country is 1, which is USA, and that is why we need to have such a design so that if you look at this table, you know that, okay, all these items here, they belong to this country. And then also for this, so here with this one is spanning multiple rows because we have 3 rows here, 1, 2, 3. So this is another type of table that you are likely to encounter or design yourselves. So let's look at how we are going to create this kind of table, i.e. a multi-row table. So let's get started. So again, we create our document class 10pt article. So the article, the A is lowercase. That's what we have here. All right. Now let's see. Once we have this, let's just make sure the spellings are correct. So here there's a red, meaning that there's something wrong here. It's incomplete. It's document class, so the class is double. That's what we should have here. So that's /document class, right? So I'll just do it again just to be sure. I'll say /document class 10pt article. And then here, if you are going to create a multi-row table such as this, you need to have an additional package. So we will say /use package, /use package, and we indicate the package. So the package is called multi-row. If you want to create a multi-row table, you need to have this package loaded. Then we have /begin documents slash end document. So this is the minimum we need to get started. I'll just run it to make sure everything is okay, and then I'll proceed. All right. So once we have this, then we also need to bring our table. So in the table, we have slash begin table, that's the table environment. And then here, you can see that it says what placement. So I talked about this in the previous tutorial when we were using the classic tables. Okay, so placement, where do you want to place it? Do you want to place it up, that's on top of the page, or below the page, or exactly where it's being created? Now, for the sake of this tutorial, let's use H. That's the placement. So I'll say H, and then I'll bring my exclamation mark to override any default settings. Then I'll come to slash end table. Let's spell it correctly. Slash end table. So in between is where we are going to have our table created. Now, once we are done here, we are going to center our table. We want to make it centered. So I'll say slash begin center slash end center. I want to center the table. So that's why I'm putting this here. Then I want to give it a caption. If you look at our table here, it says a list of newspapers by country. That is the caption for the table. So I'll say slash caption, a list of newspapers by country. That's what we have here. Okay. All right. So now what do we do? Now we create our table. So here, I think I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to minimize it so that we can have it side by side. So if you look at this table here, I'll just zoom in here. Yeah. If you look at this table here, we have the caption created, and now we need to indicate the table itself. That means you need to also have your design available. So here we have what? 2 columns. That's what we have here. All right. If you look at it critically, we see that we have 2 columns. All right. And then we need that information first. All right. So we have to create our tabular objects and then specify the column, just as we did with the classic table. All right. So we will say slash begin, and then we indicate what? Tabular. We need this first, and then we specify our columns in a curly bracket. So I bring my column in these 2 curly brackets. So we have 2 columns, and for each of the columns, I also want to make sure that there's a line drawn, okay, on the left side and on the right side for the last column. We need to have these border lines. Basically, it's the border lines, all right, the border vertical lines. And so here, I bring my vertical line, I'll say C, another vertical line, I'll say C, another vertical line, because we have 2 columns. So that's what we have here. These are the 2 columns. All right. So once you have this created, then you are ready to go. Now, after creating this, before we add the first row, which is this one, we want to make sure a line has been drawn above it. We need that line. And so we will say slash H line. All right. So we have our H line drawn. Then we will now proceed. Now we need to do this. We are adding the next row, which will be the rows which contain the headers, i.e. country and the newspapers. And so what we have to do is to say what? Country and newspapers. So this is a separator. Okay, it's separating the columns. It tells LaTeX that on the left side is one column, on the right side is another column. That's what we need here. And then because this is the end of the row, we need to indicate / double slash to tell LaTeX this is the end. In the next line, we want to have a line separating this row from the incoming row. So we have to say /h line. That's horizontal line. We are drawing that line. So we are done with this. So this line here is what we are drawing with the /h line. That's also important. Then the next record, we indicate our USA and then the newspapers. So this is where we start the work. Now, if you look at this one and this one, this design, we see that under the newspapers column, there are 3 rows. And here is just one country. So that means that this cell that we have here, it's going to span 3 rows. It is going to span 3 rows. I'll just enlarge it here. It is going to span 3 rows. And so that is where the multi-row package comes in. So because this cell is going to span multiple rows, you will need to say /multi-row. And then we need to indicate how many rows it's going to span that cell. We see that it is 3. 1, 2, 3. And so we need to indicate that in another curly brackets like this. That's what we need here. Now, after indicating the number of rows which this particular cell, or let's say that column, is going to span, we also need to indicate something else, and that is the column width. So the column width, let me just do it here. The column width, you have to use an appropriate column for it. So I repeat, you will have to indicate an appropriate column width. So here, for example, I'll just say 4 EM. Now these are lengths. Okay, so the lengths, we have P, C, EM. There are different lengths available for you to. So you have to determine the appropriate one. I think I'll leave the link to the page that shows the length measurement, or let's say length units you can use. So just take note of that. So we have that here, and then you indicate now the label. Here it's USA. So you indicate that here. So you say USA. All right, that is it. Then this becomes that particular column. So in the next column, you have to say end. All right, which is here. I'll just do it here. End, and then you give that column. So here, we start with the very first one here, the first row here, which is what? The New York Times. So here, what we should also take note of that this is one column, this is another column. There's another column, the same column, the same column. All right. So when it comes to the first initialization, which is USC, this is it. So for these ones, you have to include them line by line. And so the first one will always go with the multi-row which you have created. And so we'll say the New York Times. All right, and then you end it because that is one row. Now, what about the subsequent rows? How do we also factor the USA in? We have already done that here with the multi-row functionality. And so subsequently, we leave its placeholder blank in the next line. So in the next line, for example, when we come here, instead of we specify USA again, we leave it blank. So we say end, and then we indicate the next column for the newspapers, which is Washington Post. I'll just redo it again. The Washington Posts. We end it with our double slash because that's the end of the row. We repeat the same thing here for the third one, which is New York Post. Then we end it, and then when we come down here, we say /h line. So why do we say /h line? Because we want to separate the USA records from the UK records, which we are yet to add. All right, and so we are done with this one. Now, actually, let's do this. Let's even run it. We will run it first. Let's even do this. Once you are done with this one, then the next record becomes that for UK, which we had here, which we are going to do here. All right, so that record will be this way. That record that we have is also a multi-row. So the same pattern that we had is what we will put in here. So here it becomes /multi-row, and here it is spanning two rows, Guardian and the Sun, and so it's 2. And then the column width, we will use the same for EM, and then here it becomes UK. Then end, we bring the first newspaper, which is the Guardian. We will end that row, and in the next row, we leave the first column blank because we have already specified it here. And then we go to the Sun. And then we end it. This is how it becomes. All right. And so when we are done with this, then we are going to do what? End our tabular. Or we can add the /h line first. Then we end our tabular. Then we end our center. We will have something like this. All right. Center. But here we have already added the end center already, so that means we don't even need this one again. It's supposed to be once. So I'll just do it here. So this becomes our final command that we have. I'll just open the PDF again here so we see. So here in this table we have our caption. So we first begin with our what? Tabular environment, which is here. This, and then the table environment, and then this. I'll just add it here for us to see. That's what we begin with, and we specify the placements, which is to be here. Then, because we want to center the table, we brought the /begin center and then /end center, and then in between that block, we added a caption and then our tabular environment. So with the tabular, just like with the classical table, we define our tabular environment and indicate the number of columns that table will have. And then we add our formatting, and then when we go to the multi-row, which is this one here, it's going to span 3 rows, and therefore we have to indicate multi-row 3 and then specified the column width, and then actually give the label for that particular column and then the first record or the first column associated with it under the newspapers. Now the subsequent column, because these are all associated with USA, we don't need to bring USA again. We just leave it blank. That's why the end is supposed to be there like this. So once you are done, then you can run. So let's run this command and see what comes up. So this is what we have. So now I'll just build a view for us to see. So this is what we get. Wonderful. I'll zoom in a bit for us to see. So this becomes our multi-row table. Now, if you look at this table and this table here, you see that the country and newspapers have been boldened. And so that means you can bolden it here. So there is something you can add. Now, if you want to bolden a text, it's supposed to be /textbf, and then you indicate what you want to do. So here, it's supposed to be here, country and newspapers. So that means you can say /textbf, and then the labels come into the curly bracket. The same thing here, /textbf, and then the same thing comes here. All right. Now, once you have this, let's rerun it again, and we are going to see it here clear. Okay. So this is how we create a multi-row table. So try it and let me see what you also get. If you have some other examples you want to try your hands on, or if you also want some extra tutorial, you can just contact me. My email address is in the description, where you can have some discussions together, or you can also book a session on that. So let's move on to the third table, which is multi-column. And that is this one here, a table where one of the cells span multiple columns, such as this one here. This is very simple and straightforward, but once you get a logic, you can apply it to your other tables as well. So let's create a new file. And then let's name it. So that's table. That'll be multi-column. All right. I'll close this and then we proceed. So we are now going to create another table, which is a table which has one of its cells spanning multiple columns, such as this one. So here we have a table. There's one column, there's another column. Now the header here, we see that it spans 2 columns. So this is something that we are going to look at here. So here I'll say /document plus npt article, and then you also have what /begin documents /end document, and then in between we put in our table. So we say /begin table, we indicate the placement, which is here. Okay, so this allows us to make sure that the table appears in order as has been indicated in the LaTeX documents. So /begin documents /begin table /end table, and then in between we put in our options. We want to center the table, so I'll say /begin center /end center, and then in between I'll put in my content. So I will start with the caption. So /caption, and I'll indicate the caption. So what's the title? We have model performance. So I'll just say model performance. If I run this, let's see. If I compile, only the caption will be indicated which means we are on track. And so now we can proceed to the next activity. So if you look at the table, that's what we have. So let's draw the table. So we have, if you look at the table critically, we have 3 columns. Okay, despite that we have 2 headers here. If you look at the maximum number of columns, there are 3. Just that for one of the columns, it spans other columns, just this one. So we need to take the maximum column, which is 3 here. So when we come here, we say slash tabular, it's supposed to begin. So slash begin tabular, then you indicate your columns. All right, so vertical bar C, vertical bar C, vertical bar C, vertical bar. Then we close it. Then we add slash H line like this. And by the way, for those who are watching this, you can watch my introductory video on tables. That's how to create a classic table. So in that table, I explain a lot of things which will be helpful for you as well. So we have slash N line indicating that we want to create a horizontal line. Okay, so that line is the first one here before we populate. So wherever you see a line, we will specify it with a slash H line. Now in the next line, we indicate our first row. So the first row, what do we have? This is what we have. We have data set and we have scores. So let's start. So here we have this. I think I'll even minimize this so that we see. I'll minimize. Good. And then we can just look at it side by side. And then I will explain. I'll close this and then we see. So now we are here, the data sets and the scores. So that is the next row. So for the row, we say data sets and we add the subsequent rows. So ideally, we should have data sets and we should have another column and another column for this particular row. But if you look at what we have here, we see that the scores spans 2 columns. And so that means we will not need a third column here. It's just 2. But because this another column scores spans 2 columns, we need to make sure we let LaTeX know that. And so here we will say slash multicolumn to let LaTeX know that with this particular column, okay, it's spanning 2. So we also need to indicate how many columns it is spanning in the curly bracket, just as we did with multi-rows. And then we will indicate our column. And so here, what we need to do is this. So now we indicate the delimiters and alignments for that particular column. Okay, this multi-column one. So in the curly bracket, we say vertical line, C, vertical line. Okay, so what this simply means is that this particular column here, which is spanning 2 columns, we want a vertical line to be drawn at either sides, its left and then its right. That's why we have this vertical bars here, just as we did here. So once we are done with this, then another bracket, curly bracket, and we indicate the label, which is scores. Then we end it. So that becomes the end of that particular row. Now in the next line, because we want to draw a line first before we come to this one, we will say slash H line. Then we go to the next record. So in the next record, we have D1 90 91.2. So here there's no spanning, and so we can say D1 and 90 and 91.2. Because this is the end of the row, we bring our double slash, another horizontal line, then we say D2 and 86 and 100. We end it and say slash H line. Then finally we can say slash end tabular. That's what we need to have here. All right, you need to take note of that. All right, so this becomes what? The end. We have already done the slash end center, and so everything is okay. So I'll just do this. We'll just go over quickly and then we see. So we begin with our what? Table environment indicated the placement, and because we want to center the table, we had to bring the center formatting and then give a caption, and then we give our table, okay, with the design that we want. So now let's run it. Then let's build and view. Great. So now we have that also here. I'll just zoom in and then we see. So this is the multi-column table. Now if you look at data settings, course, they are bolded. So we can say slash text BF and then put everything in curly brackets. Then when you come here to the scores, here it's also bolded. So that means that you need to have what? Slash text BF. And then you put that also in a curly bracket. And then you can run it. So that will give you what? The bolded one. Okay. So here something seems to be wrong. And so we will need to track what went wrong here. All right. So what went wrong probably I can guess is from this side here. I'll just do it here. I'll just correct it here before we proceed. All right, so it's a typo because it's supposed to be text T. So I have to bring the T. I think now it should be corrected. So now we have it nicely down here. All right, so this is how we do it. All right, so this is for what? Creating a multi-column table. Now, this is what we have now in the very first classic table, which we have here. Let's run it. There was something else that we should have done. If you take a look at it, there was something we should have completed, and that is the bolding of the headers. And so here, for those who want to bolden it, the same thing. You can just add slash text BF curly brackets slash text BF curly brackets slash text BF curly brackets. All right, so once we run it, that should also give you what you want. Okay, now with all these tables, we can combine them into a single LaTeX document, which I will indicate here, and then we will just close it. So if let's say you wanted to combine everything into a single table, a single LaTeX document, by the way, all I have to do is to do this. I'll just copy this. That's what I will need. And then I'll indicate slash use package multirow slash begin documents slash end documents, and then in between I'm going to bring my tables. So I'll bring my first table, which is here, the classic table, which is here. I'll just start with this. I'll just copy it here. It's the same principle. So this is one table, then you bring the other table, which is here. And then the other table, which is here. I'll just copy and paste. And then I'll run it. And then I'll compile it. So let's see, good. So these are the three tables that we have. Okay, so that's the LaTeX. So these are tables. I'll just add a title. Let's see. You can add a title or anything, but basically this is what I need to just write. All right, so this is all the LaTeX codes available here. So for those who also want the LaTeX codes that I have, you can just check the description box for the codes, and then that should be fine. Okay, so that'll be all for this tutorial. And also, if you want to learn how to place your tables on the left hand side, how to align your table to the left, then check this video out, as well as my other tutorials on how to create and format tables in LaTeX.